My younger son, Sam, and I went camping in southern Illinois this past summer in an area called the Garden of the Gods. It's a series of sandstone cliffs and deep gorges formed some 350 million years ago when its sandstone base was uplifted by geological forces. One evening, we hiked to the tallest cliff, sat at the top and watched the sunset into the trees across the valley miles away. On our way up the cliff, I was anxious, thinking about some difficult issues with which I was dealing. I wasn't carrying a backpack, but it felt as if I were bearing a heavy load. Have you ever felt like that? When we reached the top, I stared out at the vastness and thought of all the ancient people who had sat in that exact same place, mulling over their problems as I was doing. Then I thought of how majestic the view was around me, and how one day I will die, and how all my current problems that now feel so large and looming were so insignificant in the great grand scheme of life. And the world and our future, instead of seeming so fragile and hazardous, seem solid and enduring and powerful to me. I was reading a biography of the writer E.B. White not long ago, and it mentioned how E.B. White was a hypochondriac and spent most of his life from the age of 10 on worrying he would die. Instead, he lived to be 86 years old. At the age of 81, when it finally occurred to him he might not expire anytime soon, he bought a canoe, tied it to the top of his car, went on a trip, and finally began enjoying life. But it took him 81 years to realize his situation wasn't as precarious as he'd imagined. I'm a lot like E.B. White. If there is the smallest wisp of a cloud in the sky, I will see a thunderstorm, maybe even a tornado. Maybe I'm not the only one like that. There seems to be much anxiety in our world. I suppose that's always been the case, but now it seems especially so. If we're not fretting about the economy, we're worrying about health care or political intolerance or global warming or what kind of world we'll leave our children and whether their opportunities will be as abundant and full as our own. Unfortunately, religion has not always been a helpful partner. Sometimes, instead of teaching us about faith and trust, it has simply given us another set of problems to worry about. The state of our souls, God's opinion of us, whether we measure up, and where we might end up. This has the unfortunate effect of making us self-centered, and we become so concerned about ourselves we forget about others. But occasionally, I'll meet someone whose experience with the loving God is so overwhelming and powerful, they see in an instant that all the things they were taught to worry about are not a threat at all. They're like E.B. White. They discovered their situation wasn't nearly as perilous as they had imagined. That experience is often accompanied by a shift in priorities, a change of focus. They move from centering on self to centering on others. Their world opens. Their compassion, once confined to their own kind, has blossomed into a deep passion for the earth and everyone on it. Not long ago, I was speaking about caring for the earth at a conference. Just a few remarks in response to a question someone had asked. And a man came up to me afterwards and said he was tired of this new emphasis on caring for the earth. New emphasis, I thought. How is that new? It was the first responsibility God gave us. The environmentalists didn't dream this one up. God did. Genesis, 1st chapter, verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make people in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the earth." This idea of earth care isn't new. We just haven't been doing it, so it seems new to us. Have dominion over, the Hebrew word used here means to lead in procession. Isn't that an interesting image, to lead in procession? So God creates the earth and the heavens and all the animals and plants And humanity then says to men and women, I'm putting you in charge of leading the way. Well, that's a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. It's a sobering thought, because humans have the responsibility for caring, for leading the way, for setting the example. That's part of the deal. We humans get to be up front, but we can't ever forget that others are coming behind us. We have to be mindful of that. That's why our land is in such jeopardy right now, why our nation is in such peril. There has been a collective forgetfulness that others were coming behind us. Our churches forgot it. Our political leaders forgot it. Our business leaders forgot it. We were leading the procession, but forgot others were following behind us and would have to suffer the consequences of our decisions. From an early age, many of us were taught it was our job to save souls. But what if our souls were never at risk? What if God loves us as we love our own children, who have nothing to fear from us? What if we began to think seriously and deeply about the real work God calls us to? Having dominion over the earth, leading the way, not in an oppressive, dictatorial sense, but with the sense of stewardship, mindful of those coming behind us, mindful of our children, their children, and their children, making the earth once again a true garden for God and a true garden for all God's children. Perhaps that's what that wise Quaker William Penn meant when he said, true religion doesn't turn us out of the world, but enables us to live better in it and excites our endeavors to mend it. That, friend, speaks my mind.